Hey, it's Drybear. Yesterday, we talked about the upcoming class balance changes that are coming into the December 20th update right after the first week of Season 1. This is to address classes that are overperforming, they're getting nerfed, and those that are underperforming and getting buffed. But in that video, I talk about how in 10.0.5 on the PTR right now, they are testing some class reworks, some pretty major talent changes and some new things, new talents, new abilities that are coming in, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you're worried about the short term, look at that video. I'll leave a link for that in the description. But today, we're going to look at the PTR and look at all the changes that are coming specifically to classes that have reworks. So let's go. If you have any questions or comments for me, feel free to drop by my live stream. I'm live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. See you there. Let's begin. It is time for the PTR test notes. Now, there is a feature in here that I'll probably just make another video for, and that is the trading post. This is going to be a way to log in monthly, get currency, and then unlock unique cosmetics that you can get for your character. Kind of like a reason to kind of keep your sub alive, log in, and you get this. You can stack it up and you'll eventually get for very low effort, you'll be able to get really cool cosmetics. And we don't even know all the cosmetics that are coming in this trading post that will exist in Stormwind and in Orgrimmar. So I'll make a separate video, I think, for this specifically, because this is kind of like a whole new thing that's going to be fun. So let's jump to the class reworks. You can already see a bunch of new talents, talent tree reworks, new connections being made between the ones that are there. We have Druid, Evoker, Hunter, Monk, Paladin, Priest, Shaman, Warlock, and Warrior that are being changed. So let's start going through those now to see exactly what we're getting out of this. At the very top, we do have Druid. These are all the changes that are coming to the class tree, which is the left talent tree in the game. The first one is all Druids now learn Swipe at level 10. And this is going to be super cool because there's actually an area in the class talent tree for Druids, specifically even for Resto Druids, that make it almost impossible to get an interrupt. So it's going to be nice to kind of have Swipe as a base kit, not part of the class tree, because where it's located makes it hard for most of the specs to pick up Swipe without sacrificing too many talent points. Swipe and Brutal Slash damage reduced by 50%. So you're going to have this by base, and then you'll have this damage reduction. Killer Instinct changed to 2 points, granting 6% physical damage and armor. Nurturing Instinct changed to 2 points, 3%, 6% magical damage and healing. These are both in the class tree. New talent, Improved Swipe, increases Swipe and Brutal Slash damage by 100%. So you get Swipe by default. It's part of all of the Druid spec trees, their base ability kit. The base damage is reduced by 50%, and you can then spec into it to get 100% damage up. So it's over what it was before, whereas it's equal to what it was before, right? So cut it in half and then double it, so you're gonna get back to the value. So if you want the current value of Swipe, you do have to talent into it, but you have Swipe available by default. New talent, Forest Walk. Casting Regrowth increases your movement speed and healing received by 5% for a scaling amount of time. Super cool. It's a nice little way to kind of have a class-based healing. Most other specs have it. Monks have the instant cast Vivify. Shamans have the extra little bonus on Healing Surge. So Forest Walk coming in for Druids is pretty neato. New talent, Gale Winds, increases Typhoon's radius by 20% and range by 50 yards. I think they're just trying to make it so that there's more choices available in the tree, so it's a little more interesting. And there's more ways to spend points while you're there. New talent, Incessant Tempest, reduces the cooldown of Typhoon by 5 seconds. I'm guessing these come out from the Typhoon, which is in the top right corner of the tree. A new connection between Rake and Rip. New connection between Maim and Tyler's Pursuit. And then new connections connecting Skull Bash, the Primal Fury, and Matted Fur. This is the change I was really hoping they were going to make. And the new connection between Verdant Heart and Iron Fur. We'll look at that in a second. Wild Growth moved up, and Remove Cursed moved to the side. Improved Rejuvenation moved up the tree. Sunfire moved up. Star Surge moved to the side. Feral Druids now start with Rip instead of Thrash. So let's take a look at that, what that looks like on the Druid tree. So the first one is we have Typhoon over here. I'm guessing we're going to get some new splits here for Typhoon coming off of that. But then Rip and Rake are going to be connected. Which means that you don't have to go through Thrash in order to get to Rip anymore, which is super cool. Let's look at these one by one. Maim and Tireless Pursuit are being put together, which is going to be these two right here. So Maim and Tireless Pursuit are being put together, which means that you can then go from Rake to Rip to Maim to Tireless Pursuit without having to get Feline Swiftness or Thrash, which is pretty cool. But also making a connection from Skull Bash to Primal Fury and Matted Fur, which means that you'll be able to jump down. So once you come down and get this, you can see the problem already and why they're making this change. But for Druids, specifically, like maybe Boomkins and Resto take it the hardest. But you have to go from Thrash, which is 1 point, to Swipe, which is 1 point, which you didn't even have by default, to Killer Instinct, which is 3 points, to Skull Bash is 1 point. And these 4 points right here don't even connect you to anything. So even going here, you can't even save on the points. You just have to spend an extra 4 points just to get an interrupt, which can be incredibly painful. So there's going to be a connection here, and then a connection here, and a connection there, which just cleans up this part of the tree. We love this change. And they said the Balanced Druid tree has been redesigned. Lunar Eclipse no longer increases the crit chance of Starfire. Lunar Eclipse now increases the damage of Starfire deals to nearby enemies by 50%. This is going to be helpful for cleave fights. We already have the multiple stacks of Starfall, but having more cleave damage options from Lunar Eclipse is going to help with those cleave fights pretty nicely. Umbral Intensity now further increases the damage of Starfire, deals to nearby enemies by 10-20%, so even more. Circle of Life and Death has been removed and has been replaced with Cosmic Rapidity. Your Moonfire, Sunfire, and Stellar Flare deal damage faster, 25% faster for your 3 possible dots, which isn't the hugest thing. It's just this talent here, which is 1 point, gets 25%. You're now going to have to spend 2 points to get the same effect, and you're losing the healing over time effect on it, but you do get the Starfire benefit. I think that what they're saying with these changes here is that they feel balance is in not a mechanical issue spot, more just a numbers scaling thing. So they're just going to be reworking this a little bit. You will have the benefits in the class tree, plus the extra cleave, which is going to be pretty nice on Starfire. Guardian tree has been redesigned as well. Ursine Adept is now baseline. Innervate can now be cast from bear form. Thank God. Sometimes this would just be dead because the bear never got to get out of bear, so you couldn't cast it. But at least now you get a little Innervate for your healers in a lot of different scenarios. Front of the Pack has been moved to row 3. So on top of being able to cast Innervate in bear form, Ursine Adept is now baseline, which means that Moonfire, Soothe, Remove Corruption, and Rebirth are usable in bear forms, and we're also being able to do Innervate as well. So this is just across the board. You don't have to spend a talent point to get it. And then Front of the Pack, which increases the radius and duration of front of your Stampeding Roar, is moving to row 3, which is, I'm pretty sure, is just going to take this spot here. So it's going to be pretty easy for you to pick it up. You're just going to have a much better front of the, Stampeding Roar, and then you'll be able to cast a bunch at baseline for bear form. Then these 2 talent spots are swapping. So Flashing Claws, which gives Thrash chance to trigger an additional Thrash, is swapping spots with Reinvigoration. So this, which gets taken a lot for really good AoE bonus, is moving further down in the tree, so it's going to be a little bit more inaccessible for what build. I mean, for M+, a lot of times you will go Rage as a Sleeper. A lot of these bleed fur builds for M+, super good for bear, which is mostly the right side of the tree. But now this Flashing Claws is going to be harder to get to. But Reinvigoration is going to be easier, so that's going to allow you to get Frenzy Regeneration cooldown is reduced by 15% for each stack. So these are going to be swapped in the tree. Then there's some new talents. Thorns of Iron. When you cast Iron Fur, you deal physical damage equal to 30% of your armor, split amongst all enemies. Super fun. Raise. Strike an enemy with the Might of Ursoc, dealing physical damage to all enemies in front of you. Deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. More AoE options. Moonless Night. When you cast a single target ability on an enemy afflicted by Moonfire, you cause them to burn for additional arcane damage. A lot of bear damage is arcane damage, so it's nice to be able to have another option there. Summons a beam of lunar light at your location, dealing arcane damage and healing you over 8.5 seconds. This is kind of cool. It's a nice little, mixes up the bear life of just thrashing and swiping over and over and building up your fur. So having a cool effect that you can put on yourself, which is nice. Pathing is restructured, so you can have that different there. And then they're indiscriminately just saying that Pulverize, Blood Frenzy, and Twin Moonfire have found slightly different homes. which means they're just moved in the tree somewhere. I guess they've just been shifted over to the side or, repositioned in different ways. And then Earth Warden, Tooth and Claw, Reinforced Fur, and After the Wildfire, Guardian of Elune, which, to make it simple, is just going to be these broken connections here. So Earth Warden is here on the left side. You see you have to go back in to come back down. Same thing for Reinforced Fur, and same thing for these two abilities here. So these are just probably, I'm guessing, just going to connect right down to the bottom, which means that if you do end up going for them, you don't have to spend extra points, going in and coming back. You can, if you wanted to, you could skip ahead and get down to the final section faster by spending points on these as options. On to feral changes. Circle Life and Death, damage over time, duration compressed, reduced to 20%, was 25%. So it's going to be compressed less. Taste for Blood, bonus to Ferocious Bite, damage increased to 4/8 instead of 2/4. So it's doubling the value on Taste for Blood. Rampant Ferocity damage increased to 35%, was 25. Dreadful Bleeding, bonus to rip damage, reduced to 15%. So you're gonna get a little bit more on Ferocious Bite scaling and a little bit less on Rip scaling. Infected Wounds, bonus to rate damage, reduced by 5%. Vein Ripper increased to bleed durations increased to 33%. Lunar Inspiration damage increased by 66%. And then some shuffling of the talents here. Lunar Inspiration getting a 66% increase is going to be interesting to say the least. We'll see how that affects everything. But some shifting of the talent locations here for Feral. Tear Open Wounds is moving to row 4. I'm wondering if it's just going to be placed here and just move up because they're not going to be moving Pouncing Strikes. They're moving Survival Instincts up. So it's probably just going to be more accessible. You almost had to take this, but you almost always were able to. So they're just going to move this up to row 5, just below where we moved Tear Open Wounds. Berserk is moving down a row as we're having some things move up. Moment of Clarity is moving down a row as well. And then they're taking Heart of the Lion on Berserk and Frenzy, and they're moving them, I'm guessing, together. They said they're moving it within this row and new connections made, which they didn't specify exactly what that is. But these two are probably going to be more closer together or are just easier to get to. Now let's take a look at Evoker Preservation. There's definitely some trepidation, some worry about the changes they're making. So let's go through the preservation changes here. Temporal Anomaly is the ability for your Evoker that allows you to shoot out a pulse. It's over here, Temporal Anomaly. You put out a pulse and it applies a shield to everyone around you. Around the pulse, and it moves quite slowly. There's also some cool effects you can do where you can apply Echo, which means you can spread lots of really cool hots or have double up on big AoE. That gets really cool. And then you have that change there. So redesign the delivery method for Temporal Anomalies Absorb Shields. Absorb Shields are now applied to all allies it passes through rather than the limited 2 allies. So you don't have to scale it up. And then the Nosdormo's teachings gives you 3 instead of 2. Instead, it's all allies that it passed through, which absorb effectiveness reduced beyond 5. Was pulses 3 times and heals 2 allies per pulse. Its speed has been increased by 40%, and the orb will no longer slow down when it attacks an ally in its radius. That's a pretty big change for Temporal Anomaly. The big thing here is that what you could do is you could. It was kind of frustrating. Like there's a positive and negative here, right? So like when you had Temporal Anomaly, you would be able to just shoot it out like this, right? And it's pretty slow. So you could actually just walk with it. You can keep up with it. You could move it, and you can get it stuck on things, and then people could kind of deal with it that way. But if you run the new Temporal Anomaly, it's going to be 40% faster than this, and it'll no longer slow down, but it will hit everyone instead. So rather than having to stand inside of it, it'll pulse. It'll give the shields. I'm guessing this will lead to a better experience, but it'll probably be the ceiling on it will get a little bit lower on how you end up being able to use it. But it will probably be a lot more reliable in that case. So maybe that's good for some people, maybe it's bad for others. Temporal Anomaly and cooldown increased to 15 seconds from 6 seconds. This is pretty huge. So they're almost tripling the cooldown on it. So this is going from 6 seconds minus haste to 16 seconds. It does cost a large amount of mana. Like if you're spamming this on cooldown, you go pretty fast, but it is super strong. There's a lot you can do with it. Nozdormu's Teachings, which is the one that increases, it's this one here. You're able to increase the amount of shields that get, the people that get shielded, since you no longer need this, since it's going to hit everybody. Reduces the cooldown of Empower spells by 5 seconds when Temporal Anomaly is cast. So that's pretty cool. I mean, if you're running with multiple, even if you're on Spirit Bloom, having a way to reduce it, this might get picked. I do like having lots of Echo on the Temporal Anomaly, but there you go. Resonating Sphere now applies Echo to the first 6 allies that it passes through, which is this one here. There was situations where even though it applies Echo at 30% effectiveness, if you could hit a whole raid group with it, you were actually just able to do insane amounts of healing. You could put your heal, your hot on everybody. You could do a really big Dream Breath. So this one, they put a cap on it, so it's only the first 6 allies instead of everybody. Time of Need cooldown reduced to 60 seconds instead of 90 seconds. So a nice little thing here. I would overall look at this as a raid nerf for preservation. Temporal Anomaly is going to be a lot less abusable and a lot more straightforward and reliable. But those use cases where you could really scale out of control with Temporal Anomaly is going away in the 10.0.5 PTR. Going on to Hunter, Marksmanship. Salvo has been redesigned. Your next multi-shot or volley now also applies Explosive Shot up to 2 targets, which is this one right here. Multi-shot and volley now also apply Explosive Shot to up to 2 targets hit, and then it goes on cooldown. So the way this is going to work is your next multi-shot or volley now also applies, and it has a cooldown. So they're turning this into an ability. So for marksman hunters, instead of just at every 45 seconds it goes off on its own, you can now control when it goes off. So for M+ pulls or big trash pulls or cleave pulls, you can pop salvo as a cooldown and then get the double explosive shot, which is really nice when you need it, which is kind of quality life. And hold on to your butts for the next one, folks. This next one is pretty insane. Double tap has been removed and has been replaced by Tactical Reload in the talent tree. And Tactical Reload is a passive that you activate that reduces the cooldown of rapid fire and aimed shot. This one is, I think, very controversial. So double tap, 1 minute cooldown. Your next aim shot will fire a second time at 100% power. This is gone. So this is going to be replaced by a passive effect, Tactical Reload, that reduces the cooldown on your aimed rapid fire. And then there's swapping Steady Focus, which is here. Steady Focus is going to swap with the new Tactical Reload. And double tap is gone. Just gone. They got rid of it. So if you're a hunter main, let me know how you feel about this down below. I'm curious how everyone's feeling about the change here. But put this down below. Double tap gone. Put down. You'll get a 10% cooldown reduction on these two. But there you go. Calling the shots now reduces the cooldown of True Shot by 2.5 seconds per 50 focus spent. Was 1.5. So calling the shots a little bit better than it was before. On to Mistweaver. This is a spec that you'll probably hear some people say is fine the way it is. I would argue after playing Mistweaver, ever since Mists, it's in a spot that needs a little bit of love. I think there's not enough options in the tree, and so I'm hoping that when this does come out, we'll see how this goes. So they're bringing back the Legion ability, Shadowlands Gift, and then so when you have this active, you'll create clouds of mists around you. It reminds me of the insect glaive in Rise, being able to get the clouds spawning and then pulling them in. And then when you activate Shadowlands Gift, it draws in all the clouds, healing up to 3 nearby allies per cloud absorbed. You have another new talent, Veil of Pride, increases Shadowlands Gift cloud of mist generation to every 4 seconds instead of every 8 seconds, which makes Shadowlands Gift even better because then you have more clouds that you can consistently use. Shahau's Lessons, each time you cast Shadowlands Gift, you learn one of Shahau's lessons for up to 30 seconds based on how many clouds of mist are consumed. And these are the lessons that you'll have available. So Lesson of Doubt, you do 30% more damage and healing to targets based on their current health. Crit chance increased by 25% when you are high health. Decreases your damage taken by 15% and increases your haste by 20%. This is super nice. Haste is a big thing for Fistweavers, even for regular Mistweavers like caster Mistweavers in M+, but having a way to get haste is super nice. Lesson of Anger, 20% of the damage or healing you deal is duplicated every 4 seconds. So super cool. It's kind of like its own little cloud burst totem. So you have these 4 options based on how many mists that you have. but you have this whole new mechanic of being able to select Shadowlands Gift, and then a way to modify it, and then based on how many mists you place down. I'm excited to see where this ends up in builds and how people end up using it. New talent, Burst of Life. Life Cocoon's cooldown is reduced by 20 seconds, but its absorb amount is reduced by 40%. When Life Cocoon expires, which is kind of like the PvP talent, when Life Cocoon expires, it releases a burst of mist that restores health to 3 nearby allies, choice node with Calming Coalescence. So you'll be able to choose between Calming Coalescence and the new Burst of Life in the Mist River tree. It'll reduce the cooldown of Life Cocoon, make it weaker, but when it expires, it heals an AoE. So I think this, plus the mists, plus more situational choices based on how many mists you have, just gives you more AoE healing when you need it, and also AoE healing that you won't have to do extra mana consumption to get through. Revival healing now increased by 100% while not in raid. They did this for a few healers. This is just to help with their performance in M+. Added a connection from Veil of Pride, Shadow's Lesson choice node, to the Rising Mist Tier of Mourning choice node. And Bone Dust Brew has been removed and replaced with Shadowlands Gift. So Bone Dust Brew in the bottom of the tree is being replaced by the new talent. Attenuation is removed, which affects Bone Dust Brew, and being replaced with the lessons that we have here. And then Bountiful Brew, which modified Bone Dust Brew, is being removed and replaced with Veil of Pride. So this is kind of a separate option from Shadow's Lesson. So down on that point, you're just basically Mistweaver is losing Bone Dust Brew as an option, which I think is perfectly fine. It was kind of awkward to use, and I think this is a lot more interesting gameplay for Mistweaver. So if you're a Mistweaver, let me know how you feel about this. I'm sure we'll get a lot of testing out of it, but I'm curious to see how it goes. On to Paladin. Blessing of Winter has been redesigned. This is the blessing for Holy Paladin that when you put it on a target, they have a chance to do bonus frost damage and slow the target with a stack on it. So usually would give it to people that attack fast to get that proc. But now it restores 1% mana per 2 seconds. And remember, the blessings last like 30 seconds. It's crazy long. And it's only castable on friendly healers. I think this only means that you can cast on other people rather than just randomly casting it on a DPS. I'm wondering if this means that you can't cast it on yourself, which would be kind of awkward for Blessing, or maybe they just meant that you can only give it to healers. Avenging Crusader now casts 5 Holy Power. This was an option that you would take in the bottom of the Holy Tree, which we can look at. If we jump on Paladin real quick, we have down here by Avenging Wrath Might, you had a choice of Avenging Crusader. This was kind of like your Fistweaver style play. There was actually periods where this was really, really like this was the end-all be-all build, which is super fun. So what they're doing is they're making it meaningfully different from just getting Avenging Wrath Might, which in most cases you would, just because Avenging Crusader just isn't being picked up enough. What they're doing is they're changing it from 25, it's like 50% of your base mana that it costs to cast this, which is painful. They're making it 5 Holy Power instead. So you're gonna fill to 5 Holy Power. You do that anyway because you're already doing Dusk and Dawn. To get the Blessing of Dawn, you have to hit 5 Holy Power every 20 seconds. So you'll be able to spend that right away on Avenging Crusader, which is pretty cool. Those 5 Holy Power, they reduced the cooldown to 45 seconds instead of 2 minutes, and the duration was reduced from 20 seconds to 12 seconds, which I would say is a pretty nice buff. You don't have to spend mana on it anymore, which is awesome. I mean, Holy Paladin already has pretty strong mana regeneration, but this is gonna make it better. It's 45 seconds, which means you can move it more often, but think about it's a 2-minute cooldown that lasts 20 seconds. If you cut that down to 45 seconds, 12 seconds is actually, you get relatively more based on the cooldown itself. So they're basically just giving a nice big buff to Avenging Crusader. We'll see if people take it more often than they are right now. Tower of Radiance now causes Holy Light and Flashlight to additionally have a chance to grant a Holy Power based on your target's current health when cast on targets without Beacon of Light, increasing to 100% on targets below 50% health, which is going to be this talent right here, Tower of Radiance. And I actually really like this change. I've been pushing my Holy Paladin. I think this change is great because this Tower of Radiance makes it so when you heal your Beacon of Light target, you get an extra Holy Power, especially when you're playing off of your Dawn and Dusk builds where you have to hit 5 Holy Power, then hit 0 Holy Power. There are times where you have 4 and none of your abilities that give you Holy Power are up, and so your most optimal choice is to just cast a Holy Light or a Flash of Light on your Beacon of Light target just to get that extra Holy Power. So what this does now is it will additionally have a chance to grant holy power based on your target. So if you heal a target that's really low, it's your spot healing, even when it's cast on targets without Beacon of Light, you get a chance to get an extra holy power, which is super cool. So you have that option where you might just be getting more holy power generation just overall. Inflorescence of the Sunwell now grants a holy power every third cast of holy light with infusion of light. It was a 30% chance, so they're just making this more consistent. It used to be 30% chance, which if you know math, it means that you could go 5, 6, 7, 8 casts without getting a proc off of this. This just means that it's guaranteed 33 per, it's guaranteed every third. So no matter what, every 3 times, you'll get that locked in. On to Priest. Peep the text wall. We've got Priest changes. Let's go through them. So Priest base class tree. New talent, Petrifying Scream. Psychic Scream now causes enemies to tremble in place instead of fleeing in fear, like and running away. It's nice to just have this as an option for fear abilities, so I think it's just going to be kind of nice. Surge of Light now properly triggers from all healing spells. I didn't even realize that was not happening, so that's awesome. The root effect of Void Tendrils now displayed on enemy nameplates. Thank God. So these are just kind of quality of life. These probably should have just been there already, so they're getting those is going to be nice. Then we've got some major stuff coming in for Discipline. And honestly, I think Discipline's in a great spot minus throughput. Like it plays well, it works well. I think it just doesn't heal enough. So I'm curious to see how all of this ends up. Pain Transformation now causes pain suppression to heal your target for 25% of maximum health was 12. So doubling the effect of Pain Transformation. Super nice. Protector of the Frail now also grants pain suppression an additional charge. If we jump in here, there's some modifiers you can add to pain suppression for disc. So you take pain suppression, you go down here. Protector of the Frail is something that reduces the cooldown of pain sup by 3 seconds every time you power word shield. What they're doing is they're changing this so that Protector of the Frail also grants pain suppression an additional charge. This is a massive change, because arguably this is one of the best, if not the best, external that a healer has in the game, which means getting 2 of them is pretty darn cool. Light's Wrath now costs 2% of base mana. Power Word Solace damage reduced by 15%, which does in turn reduce its healing as well. Mind Blast now costs 1.6 of base mana, was 2.5. So Light's Wrath going up, a Mind Blast going down. Painful Punishment now increases the duration of Shower Word Pain or Purge the Wicked by 1.5 seconds. So Painful Punishment being doubled. Holy crap, that's big. Embrace Shadow now increases the duration of Shadow Covenant by 8 seconds instead of 4 seconds. Twilight Corruption has been redesigned. Shadow Covenant increases the damage and healing of shadow spells by an additional 10%, which you actually didn't see Shadow Covenant being picked too much in most content. So what they're doing is they're coming down here to Twilight Corruption. This is while Shadow Covenant is active, Penance becomes Dark Reprimand, causing shadow damage over 1.8 seconds. So rather than just replacing your penance with Dark Reprimand, that's gone. You'll just increase your shadow healing while Shadow Covenant is active if you take this this spot right here. Then they're giving us Dark Reprimand by default. So when you have Shadow Covenant and it's active, Penance is automatically turned into Dark Reprimand. You don't have to have that talent in the corner to replace it. It's always there. And they made it so Dark Reprimand Shadow Penance can be cast on allies. And if you end up picking up the Twilight Corruption change, increases the damage and healing of shadow spells. So you get Dark Reprimand because of Shadow Covenant. You can cast it on allies, and you can modify the shadow healing to have more on it, which is cool. So this part of Shadow Covenant, it just wasn't being picked. So they're trying to make it a little bit more kitted out and a little bit less requiring extra points to be useful, which does make it a harder choice. Soul and Psyche has been redesigned and renamed to Abyssal Reverie. Atonement heals for 10%, 20% more when activated by shadow spells. Again, they're just trying to get people to use Shadow Covenant, basically. Which at first sounds kind of bad. That's this right here, Stolen Psyche. Atonement heals for more when it's activated by Mind Blast. So what they're doing is they're just making this even better. Stolen Psyche is being replaced to Atonement heals for 20% more when activated by shadow spells. So rather than this being, it's not going to be as much, but you will be able to get 20% more on all shadow spells. And then again, you get Dark Shadow Penance, you get more shadow. So they're just basically making this side of the tree more viable as an option. So I'm curious if that ends up becoming useful in any content. So there you go. Train of Thought causes Powered Solace to trigger a cooldown reduction for Penance and Smite. So you're getting Penance added to Train of Thought. Blaze of Light increase the damage of Powered Solace in addition to Smite and Penance. Super nice. Wheel and Woe increase the damage of Powered Solace in addition to Smite. Now you can see why they were doing some Powered Solace damage reduction up here because of these changes down here. Wrath Unleashed increase the damage of Powered Solace in addition to Smite. So they're just making it so Powered Solace can be part of the rotation and isn't just used for damage when you can get it. Harsh Discipline can trigger from Powered Solace and Mind Blast in addition to Smite, and it's no longer tracked through Smite and instead appears on the personal resource display. Neat. Void Summoner can now trigger from Powered Solace in addition to Smite, Mind Blast, and Penance, and they added a few connections to the sides of row 6 and row 8, and they fixed an issue preventing Dark Guard Man from consuming power of the dark side. So basically, they're beefing up the shadow playstyle of Disc. They're making better connections. They're making it so abilities can be used in conjunction with each other and making some minor number changes. I think this is just, maybe they want to do this first to see if the build they had in mind for Shadow Discipline works and then play around with it. This isn't the kind of buff that I was hoping, although keep in mind, we do still have these, getting Pain Transformation for healing on Pain Sup, and then two Pain Sups is pretty large. So we'll see how that goes. Holy, Burning Vehemence, and Searing Light have swapped positions in the talent tree. Searing Light is now a 1-point talent. Smite and Holy Nova to deal 25% increased damage to targets affected by Holy Fire. All this does is just give Holy an extra talent point that they can use. Nito Burrito Bandito. Burning Vehemence is now a 2-point talent and has been redesigned. Increase the damage of Holy Fire by 15-30%. Holy Fire deals 15-30% of its initial damage to all nearby enemies within 12 yards of your target, which is this right here. So specifically in M+, you are able to do Empyrean Blaze, and then you can do, Holy Divine Word with Holy Word Chastise to get bonus damage. Then you pop Empyrean Blaze, and you get a whole bunch of Holy Fires on the target. However, they're reworking Burning Vehemence so that instead of just increasing damage of Holy Fire by 25%, it's a 2-point talent that goes up to 30%, and it makes your Holy Fire AoE. So how cool is that? You can still use Imperial Blaze. You can do a whole bunch of AoE, stack up a bunch of dots, and just, I think this is just mostly targeting trash clearing and then damage in Mythic Plus. Though, I guess I didn't think about the implications of Arena, so we'll see how this works. Just in general for Arena. Obviously, it's not a whole lot, but you can get some extra dot stacking, which can be protective for purges or cleanses or other buffs. So there you go. There's an extra change for Holy. And Prayers of the Virtus now increases the maximum stack count of Prayer of Mending by 2 per point. This is mostly useful in Raid. You don't really get to, you don't really run into max stack problems in small group play, but in large group, it is super nice to be able to have higher stacks on Prayers of the Virtuous. Shadow resolved an issue, causing the Shadow versions of Halo and Divine Star to cost less mana than the Holy versions. Cool. Divine Star now generates 6 Insanity. Halo now generates 10 Insanity. Mind Games now generates 10 Insanity. Woo, that's pretty cool. So now there's just more Insanity in for Shadow Priest. I don't know if it'll solve the Shadow Priest dilemma right now, but it is nice to have. You just get more Insanity if you... I think almost all Shadow builds are running either Divine Star or Halo, so that you're going to get some nice Insanity out of that. And then Mind Games is in every build, so you'll be able to get some Insanity out of that as well. Shaman is getting the small group change that we saw above. Healing Tide Totem, which is your long raid cooldown, is going to be doubled while not in raid. Same thing that Mistweaver got. So that just means it's going to be a little more viable in Mythic Plus and in Arenas, which is really cool. Warlock, Soulkeeper, has been redesigned. It now summons a Soulkeeper that consumes all tormented souls you've collected, blasting nearby enemies for chaos damage per soul consumed over 8 seconds. You collect tormented souls from each target you kill and occasionally escape souls you previously collected. This is going to be reworked, which is in the class tree down here. They're just kind of messing with this down here, which, So summon Soulkeeper, rather than having a longer duration based on how many souls you consumed, it has a flat duration that does more damage based on how many souls you consume. So I think it probably makes it a little more satisfying. I haven't done the math to see if it's the same damage output overall, because this is you have up to 8 and then you have 8 seconds, but it's probably gonna be somewhat similar. But this way, at least you get to see the effect rather than it, you know, if with low soul count it just pops and you don't really get the same feeling to it. So it's nice to be able to have bonus damage. I think it's overall better, but I'd have to go do the math really quick. Then the talent that's right next to it, Inquisitor's Gaze, is now passive and has been redesigned. Your spells and abilities have a chance to summon an Inquisitor's Eye that deals chaos damage over time. So that one is going to be right next to it. Inquisitor's Gaze, it's a 10-second cooldown. You summon an eye that periodically blasts damage and occasionally dealing damage. Blast enemies for damage and occasionally dealing shadow flame damage instead. It's a little bit higher, and it lasts an hour. So instead of that, it's just a passive that just will occasionally summon an eye that deals damage. You don't have to activate it. So their note here is, Soulkeeper scaling its duration based on souls consumed has felt a bit awkward to use, which is true. Sometimes it would just be a couple ticks. Sometimes it would be a lot, and it just felt kind of weird. So it's going to scale damage instead. Inquisitor's Gaze being active all the time lends itself to having lower throughput than we'd like. We're redesigning it to be a frequent proc that deals considerable damage instead of a buff you click and forget. So what they're saying here basically is, because it lasts an hour and just does damage all the time, they had to lower the power of it because it's always up. That uptime means it has to be less effective. So to make it feel, they're basically just making both of these feel better. They're making it so that when it does pop up, it does meaningful damage, but it is not going to be up all the time. So when you see it, it's going to be a little bit cooler. Now, Affliction. We saw a bunch of Affliction buffs in the December 20th update. So this is going to be a little bit further beyond that. But Soul Tap has been removed, which is this baby right here. Soul Tap, instant, sacrifice 5% of your soul each to gain a soul shard. So this one ended up being kind of 5-head. Managing your soul shards to get this ended up being, you really kind of had to pay attention. Plus it's an extra global, so you kind of have to be able to use that properly. And there's already a lot of globals for Affliction, especially when you're changing targets. So they're removing this, and it's just going to be a replacement of Focused Malignancy. Malefic Rapture deals 30% increased damage to targets suffering from unstable affliction. So this will be a passive. You'll lose another GCD that you already have a bunch of them, so it's going to be a little bit smoother. And you have to be a little less math guy to figure out when it's best to pop up your soul tap and to make sure that you're using it properly and all that stuff. So yeah, I think this is probably a good change. It's going to make it feel a lot better. Soul Swap has been redesigned. Copies are damage over time effects from the target, preserving their duration. Your next use of Soul Swap within 10 seconds will exhale a copy of the effects onto a new target, which should be pretty fun. What Soul Swap does now is it just applies Corruption Agony and UA to the target on a 30-second cooldown. What this does instead is it'll snapshot all of your current dots. You can just fully dot something, snapshot it, and then you can, spit out all your dots onto a new target, which will help a lot, especially like you can build something up, snap it, you have 10 seconds to hold on to it. When an ad spawns in a boss fight, you can instantly dot up the target without having to just dot this here. And I think it's going to have more implications to how you handle that. So that should help Affliction feel a little bit better in that standpoint. Warrior. We know Arms got some nice buffs to Execute, to Mortal Strike, some damage overall, but they're getting more in the PTR build. Defensive Stance is now talented by default. Shuffled the positions of some nodes towards the end of the tree and added some new connections to try and aid the creation of more general builds. So in the Arms tree, they're shifting a whole bunch of stuff around to just give you more options. So if you're playing Arms right now, just be aware that the tree is going to shift a good bit. Valor and Victory now only 1 rank and provides 1% versatility and reduces the cooldown of Die by the Sword by 30 seconds. Neato. Improved Slam. Slam has a 10% increased chance to critically strike and deals 30% increased critical strike damage. I'm never a fan of Slam builds, but Improved Slam is an option, and maybe they're trying to, again, to encourage more builds for Arms. Improved Overpower and Battle Lord now also increase the damage of Dreadnought. So if you pick up Dreadnought, you don't feel as bad for picking it up. Dreadnought's super fun. It's nice to have. So now you can, if you end up building a build around that, picking up Dreadnought feels a little less bad. Battlelord's chance to reset the cooldown Mortal Strike or Cleave increased to 35% from 25%. Skull Splitter now causes deep wounds to expire instantly. That should be pretty fun to see. Tide of Blood now only causes Rend to expire instantly as deep wounds is built into the Skull Splitter. Fair enough. Sweeping Strikes is now baseline. You don't have to talent it into it anymore. That's pretty cool. And a new talent is showing up. Spiteful Serenity, Colossus Smash, and Avatar's durations are doubled, but their damage bonuses are reduced by 50%. Interesting. I'd have to mess around with this. I wonder, yeah, interesting. Again, this means that you can take different routes in the tree if you end up picking up Spiteful Serenity, but we'll just see. We'll see. I think this hopefully is a good change. This could go wrong for arms, but on top of the buffs they're already getting, this might end up just feeling really good. I'd say everything here is good. I'm curious to see how much shuffling they end up doing there. Little minor things. Newly trained Draenei, Lifeforged Draenei, Orc Tauren, Highborn Tauren now specialize in Rogue Mage and Priest classes are now located in the major. Blah, blah, blah. Neato, who cares? Common white and poor gray quality equipment cannot be used for transmogrification. Wow, you can wear trash. Neat. Enchant illusions cannot be applied on artifact weapons. So the Legion, the artifact weapons that you have, you can now apply enchant illusions on them. This should be interesting. That opens up a whole new world for us. New toy, reusable oversized bobber, acquired from catching 100 fish with oversized bobber. The toy version supports all bobbers in your toy collection and want to make them work with new bobber additions. So fishers rejoice. That's pretty cool. PvP precognition duration increased to 5 seconds and now also prevents cast pushback. Battlegrounds. Chrysalis PvP talent now reduces life cocoons cooldown by 30 seconds. Was 45 seconds. Remember, there's a new talent in the regular non-PvP tree that does reduce cooldown again. So they just want to make sure that you don't lose, you don't get a lot, double whammy there. So, but I think it actually ends up being an overall buff on life cocoon for PvP. You can actually get this down to a pretty short cooldown if you're running in PvP. And then Warlords of Draenor crafted item appearances have returned. So you can get those for optional reagents for each relevant profession from vendors in the garrison or in your Ashram, your warlords. Portals from Warlord Titan Touch node should be more consistently take you to a new location. Cool. So there it is. The class changes, the class reworks, all that stuff. Curious what you guys think about all of this. Some of this is pretty major, and some of it will just have some pretty big impacts and ripples going forward. So the big questions for me is, Druids, are you happy with all this, change places, musical chairs that's going on here? There's a lot being changed about Druid. Evoker, are you okay with the temporal anomaly change? Marksmanship, double taps gone, rip that. Mistweavers, do you like all the changes here? Holy's getting some nice changes. Priest's getting a bunch of changes. Warlock, some pretty substantial changes. And then Arms Warrior, how do you feel about this? Comment down below. If you want to hang out with me, come drop by my live stream. I'm live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. See you there. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.